This is my interview with Labour MP for Brighton and Kempton, Lloyd Russell-Moyle. I would just like to emphasise, as with all of my interviews that I've done so far on this channel, his views do not represent mine, and please enjoy. I'm joined by Labour MP for Brighton Kempton, Lloyd Russell-Moyle. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, especially at a time when I know there are lots of things happening at the moment. And I know you've been under a lot of stress recently as well. Before we start, can we just clear a few things up? You obviously were involved in a disagreement with JK Rowling and you apologised for the remarks that you made. Since then, have you been able to move on and draw a line under all of this?
Yes, I mean, look, my principal disagreement with JK Rowling remains. I clearly was wrong to suggest that she was kind of doing anything other than good faith in disclosing her awful sexual abuse. And of course, I went on to say, actually, trans people had shown solidarity with her, despite the son trying to victimise her. So it was badly worded, and so then you have to apologise because you made the mistake. But the substantive is that we are having huge straw man arguments about this issue, because all the things that people say they're scared of happening if we have gender reform are already law, and all the things that safeguards that could be put in if we reform the law can't be put in because they're saying they don't want these things to happen that already can happen. It becomes a circular argument, and really, it is not a them or us argument. It is an argument about saying it's quite right that we have to defend women's spaces, and it's quite right we have to defend trans people. And in fact, we are doing neither at the moment well. And while we have the debate where it is, where it's just used as a kind of proxy war for this culture war that we see happening across the world, actually we will undermine the rights of trans people and more broadly of queer people. So there are some real issues that I think we can come together, and Keir is totally right to say there is a way through this. And that's what I was trying to say, but let's be honest, I messed it up, didn't I? Because I messed up that particular paragraph.
I've noticed that your Twitter account has been removed. Are you taking a break from social media because of the press and everything?
Well, we removed my Twitter account in solidarity with the No Space for Jewish Hate thing. We just deleted the account. The intention was to put it back up on when everyone else did. We've just not got round to doing that. And actually, I've quite enjoyed the last few days without having Twitter immediately to hand. I'm currently, whilst I'm still working, doing these interviews, I'm just from home. I'm not doing anything for the office, as many of us are. And so it might well be that we have a few more days of it without going back on, and we'll turn it back on in the after the summer is over. We'll decide. But originally it was taken down because of that, because there is a real worry, and it's not just around Jewish hate and anti-Semitism, but it is around racism, it is around homophobia, it is around sexism. It's generally, I find, Twitter is a far more aggressive form of media than other forms of media. And how we get that right, the media companies need to be involved in that discussion.
So are you likely to take a long break from Twitter for the summer? Is that something that you're intending to do then?
Well, that wasn't the intention at all, but I have quite enjoyed the last few days without Twitter. It might well be that we come back in a different kind of way or a different space. My reflection is Twitter is good for getting your messages out there. It's not good for engaging with people. Engage with people on Facebook, on Instagram, they're very good platforms for that. But Twitter really is just about getting your views out there. So we might come back, me and my office might bring it back, but in a kind of more information kind of broadcast way. We'll see. We'll see. I'm
lucky to live in a country where we have so much freedom and so many human rights protections in UK legislation. However, we still live in a country where gay conversion therapy is still a legal practice. And this really upsets me. We know how damaging this practice is on people's mental well-being. As a gay person myself, I don't think this is sending a message of the fundamentals of tolerance and liberty which this country stands for. In 2018, Prime Minister Theresa May's LGBT Action Plan said the government would bring forward proposals to end the practice. Boris has said that they're going to be doing a study into this. Do we need more urgent action from the government to remove this outdated practice?
Yes, we need to prevent the practice, particularly in any kind of medicalised settings, of conversion therapies. However, the law on this needs to be drafted extremely carefully, because you, of course, do want specialised counselling. You do want to be able to allow LGBT people to maybe go to counsellors to talk about their sexuality and work these things through. So we'd have to be very careful to not say you're not allowed to have therapies that are around sexuality, sexual desires, etc. And how you draw that line, not knowing what happens in the consulting room, for example. Either you create a law that signals the end but doesn't actually bar it because it's too loose, or you draw a law that is too tight that then means that actually you're clamping down on legitimate things. I think there is a way forward, and there is a number of proposals that have been put forward on this, and I think we should start to move towards doing that. And the best way to do that is for the government to lay something down and let it go through the scrutiny process of the committees, and then you'll get a better iteration. The longer we scrutinise it, and so we have discussions and all agree or all argue on theoretical points, but these are practical issues. These are practical issues because they harm individual people's lives and they damage people for long periods of time. And not just always the people that have gone through the therapies, but also their families and people around them.
And you came out as HIV positive in your speech in Parliament back in 2018. I can't imagine how nerve-wracking that must have been. You became the first MP to reveal their status in the Commons. Despite nearly 2 years passing since this speech, is there still a stigma attached with HIV and a general lack of understanding by the general public of the virus?
There is a stigma, of course. The biggest stigma, I think, at the moment is actually, and this is something that has greatly reduced in my life, is internalised stigma. I don't think you get huge numbers of people who will kind of attack you in the workplace or in the street or anything like that at the moment. But what you do get is a personal fear that you can't speak out, that you can't live your life who you are, and you can't have the relationships that you want. Me talking about it in Parliament helps lift some of that off because, well, everyone knows, don't they? So actually that is part of the process of destroying the stigma. Most people are too polite to say horrible things to your face. So maybe they do say nasty things about it to me. And yes, we did get, lots of people ringing up the office saying horrible things. And we still do sometimes get people writing in letters in funny coloured ink saying nasty things. But the reality is there are nasty people out there. And I have still had probably more abuse about the colour of my hair than I have about my sexuality or my HIV status. I remember when I first stood for a councillor, someone came up to me saying, look, we're fine with the gays, but we're not sure about the gingers. And they were serious. And so to some extent, that's something that I've just coped with throughout my life. And usually my response is to tell them to not very politely go away. And I usually use some expletives. That sometimes gets me into trouble. But my response usually is if someone hits me, I want to hit them back verbally, quickly. And that's how you should do it.